Alright, you guys, it's Morales again. This is 35.2 Global Depression. How exciting, Global Depression. So, after World War One, we have some, well, the world has some issues. So, understand the Global Depression, also known as Great Depression, impact of the Depression, and efforts to deal with the Great Depression. So, everything surrounds the whole premise after World War One. There was kind of, for some places, a facade of prosperity. Look up facade. You have to figure it out. It's context clues. So this is one of those things you get to do as a student, is to find out things you don't know and work on some things on your own. Anyways, it looked like things were returning back to normal. Particularly the United States goes through a period of time called the Roaring Twenties. So flappers, dancing, all that good stuff. The image is like it's good, but underlying things were already going bad, especially for farmers and early beginnings of industrial downturn already. So the reality that much of it was built on false prosperity, image that it looked good, did not match up. Okay. And that quickly changes. Okay, and everything hinges on the fact that the U.S. is doing well and supporting the other economies in a couple ways. First of all, this sequence, everything's tied together. Austria and Germany are borrowing money from the U.S. to pay back war debts for France and England. Remember, the Versailles Treaty makes Germany and Austria pay reparations. Okay. The only way Austria and Germany can do this is to borrow money from the U.S. to pay this. So Germany and Austria take the money and pay France and England, okay, for the reparations. France and England take the money they get from Germany and Austria-Hungary, and they pay on the U.S. loans that they borrowed during World War One. So the whole system is dependent upon the U.S. giving money to Austria-Hungary and Germany. Austria-Hungary give the money to France and England. England gives the money back to the United States, who then returns it to the U.S. to loan. So it's kind of this cycle of things. It's dependent on the cash flow, or the flow of cash or capital from the U.S., and it's okay as long as the U.S. is doing it. The next one, colonized by U.S., that one really didn't happen. That's just to check to see if you're working class. And then in 1928, investors start to pull out. They start to invest a lot less in Germany or in Europe because they fear that it's just getting overdone, that there's not that much in it as far as return. The new technologies in the Great Depression, the internet-based companies, that really didn't happen as well. Sorry. If you're watching this and you have no idea what's going on here, this is one of the things I do to check to see if kids are paying attention and have done a good job of reading. Alright, so new technologies are also going to hurt the growing worldwide economy. The demand for coal goes down because oil is being used to fuel more and more things, and so areas that had been big, huge coal providers are now no longer as valuable. England. Okay, single export countries are going to be devastated by the declines in new technology. For example, those that produce cotton, well, now there's synthetic cotton. Although cotton is valuable, the synthetic cloth becomes very important too, and so less demand for cotton. And then they're even going to have synthetic guano. That is awesome. So nitrogen for fertilizer, the guano caves. I just got to check out a guano cave. I want to so put Chavez in a guano cave and see what he does. And then also, reclaimed rubber destroys the economies of the Dutch East Indies and Malaysia and Ceylon. Because they're now able to recycle rubber, there's less need for that. And since rubber is kind of a hard-to-get item, these areas of the Indies, Malaysia, Ceylon, and also the one in Africa, the Belgium, Congo area, those become less valuable because their product is not in demand as much. So that hurts their economy because they're pretty much dependent on just one thing to come out of there. Okay, so here's the cycle. The U.S. stops to giving money to Europe. Germany can't pay England or France. Germany can't pay. England and France can't pay the U.S. The U.S. banks are in trouble. The U.S. banks cut money to U.S. businesses. The U.S. businesses slow production. So because the U.S. can't get any money, the U.S. businesses start to slow down. The U.S. businesses start to slow down, so they start to fire people. People with no jobs have no cash, no buying, which leads to even more production cuts in factories, which leads to more job cuts since you don't need as many factory workers. To try to stem the deal, the U.S. imposes a tariff to protect U.S. businesses. Well, Europe does the same thing to protect their businesses, which are hurting, which leads to the U.S. collapsing and not being able to fund any other groups, which leads to the entire collapse of Germany, much of Western Europe. As far as the economy goes, they just go down the tubes. So that's the long story of it, the long deal with it. Okay. Well, what happened there? Okay. The Great Depression also kicks in because of agriculture surplus. During the late 1910s, during World War I, there was a huge demand for agriculture products, especially by the U.S. in particular, because France and Great Britain and Germany and all the European countries were involved in the war. The U.S. takes advantage of this. So at home in the U.S., farmers take out large loans to buy more land and buy better tractors so they can farm more stuff because they're the only ones farming it. So there is a huge demand for production. They meet the production, but then the war stops. Soon after that, France, Great Britain, and those areas, in particular Germany, start to produce their own agricultural products, so no longer a demand. What eventually happens is there's a glut on the market. There's too much stuff. So the World War I boom that had just a couple years been great for the U.S. now kicks in to hurt them because there's so much product out there that the price of the product goes down a lot. Not just a little bit, but a lot. The fact that in 1925, 1929, they have huge harvests for the areas, so they have a whole bunch of food coming in. Okay, the prices drop. So wheat, lowest prices in 400 years. Farm incomes drop. The farmers can't make enough money. They can't pay the bills. They can't pay the bills. The banks close on them. The banks close on them, and that's more and more people out of work, and the cycle continues. The inventory surplus is so big that they just don't know what to do with it. In some cases, they tried to increase them. They start to burn them out in the fields and just destroy the crops to limit the amount of stuff out there in hopes that that might drive up the price. Ultimately, it's unsuccessful. On top of that, America also gets kicked in the noogies because they have the Dust Bowl in the late 1930s. So remember, the westward expansion spreading to the Great Plains, what we now cause an ecological disaster by overplowing the area and overfarming the area, and so there's nothing to hold down the dust. The dust gets caught up in the wind. There's drought, and some parts of Texas and Oklahoma, in that area, they didn't see any rain for something like 2 or 3 years. So farming is not going to happen in those areas. Okay. Then finally we have the Black Thursday, October 24th. Also there's a Black Tuesday, which is the following Tuesday. And that's another drop in the stock market, but there had been during the 1920s this huge rise in investors in the stock market, many of them buying on margin. In other words, they buy a stock that's worth $100. They only put $3 down, okay, and then they promise to pay the other 97 for the stock once they sell the stock. Well, everything's great as long as the stock continues to go up, but if it doesn't go up, they still owe the $97. In particular, if it goes down, they still owe the $97. We'll multiply that by thousands. The people start pulling out of the market. Okay, the prices drop, okay, dramatically, like in one day, 60%, 40% of the value of the stock is gone. By the time people are able to react, the stock values can hit so low that they don't have any money. So on the ground is one of our investors who was investing in the stocks, and it didn't work out too well for him. All this because of the hints of slowdown in Europe, because they think it's overvalued for a couple of reasons, okay, and it has this massive snowball effect. No one wants to be the last one holding the stocks, so they tried to sell them as fast as they can, which leads to more of a panic, which leads to more chaos and all sorts of fun stuff in the economy. And this is mainly the American economy that's getting pulverized, but other places, their stock markets were hurt as well. The U.S. economic collapse is massive, but nothing compared to other places. Inventory surplus because there's too much stuff. You got to fire the workers. Fire the workers. Other workers, they don't have money to buy stuff from other places. They have to fire workers, and so on and so on. The layoffs decrease the demand for stuff. Businesses start to fail. In 1932 alone, industrial production fell to half of the 1929 levels. We were producing half as much as we were 3 years ago. By 1932, I think it is, 44% of U.S. banks are out of business. Well, that's money that people had invested in there or savings in there, and that money is essentially gone. Kids always ask, where did the money go? Well, it just went away. Okay, Once you put your money in your bank, they don't really hold on to it in the safe. It's not the same bills that you're getting back. So this money is invested to loans to farmers, loans to banks, loans to businesses, all of which are now going out of business. They can't pay, so they really can't get the money back. Okay. So here's one more of the circle thingies. Less consumer demand means less factory production. Less factory production means less factory workers. Less factory workers means there's less demand for product, which means there's less factory workers. You get the picture. All this kicks into a worldwide economic collapse. As I was saying, okay, after World War I, the U.S. is the primary supporter of many of the economies. Not all of them, but many of them. So they're dependent upon American products or American investment capital more so. So throughout the world, countries, especially countries dependent on exports for their industries, are really hurt. This is Japan and Germany. Okay, they don't have enough of the resources to do industry without some help. They need some products from outside. Japan in particular needs oil. Germany needs oil. Okay, those are two things. Russia and the United States, the biggest providers of oil at the time. Okay, they're suffering, so they start to sell less and less to Japan and Germany, which makes Japan and Germany suffer, and they get mad. It's only a matter of time before they go, forget this, we'll just get it ourselves. Single export countries, these are smaller countries, not as industrialized. They're really hurt. The Latin American countries, Asia and Africa, the ones that did rubber, the ones that did cotton, they get messed up, and so they start to suffer as well. And then initial attempts to increase demand are kind of be futile. So the idea is that, well, if there's less stuff, the value of that stuff goes up. So in Brazil, kids always think I'm lying, but I'm not lying. They use the surplus coffee beans because they had so many. They're set on fire, and sometimes they're even used to build roads, to pave roads, so kind of like gravel. Okay, coffee beans are, I guess, really hard. You put them on the road, you got a road. Okay, in the U.S., the idea of what's called planned scarcity, which scares the snot out of me. So these are the overproduction of stuff that was going on in the farms. Instead of giving to people or try to sell them for what they can, they would destroy some of them to increase the price of the stuff that wasn't destroyed. So vegetables, fruits, animals. All this in an effort to bring up prices. So this is portrayed in the book The Grapes of Wrath, which is definitely one of my favorite novels. So read that quote in there because it'll probably be on your test. Okay. And the new strategies for trying to deal with the overall thing. It's clear that the laissez-faire strategy has not been working. Laissez-faire, the idea that the government doesn't get involved. It was a policy that hasn't been followed for a long time, although it's not really true because the government gave deals and stuff to like railroad companies and other things, so they are involved. It's just we don't want them involved when they're going to stop you or force rules. So planned scarcity, all those that file. John Maynard Keynes is an economist at the time, and he starts to look at it a little bit differently, and he suggests that it's the government's job to stimulate the economy, okay, to help create jobs by, number one, lowering interest rates, okay, number two, encouraging investment and encouraging employment. He was one of the guys that says that, hey, if a good solution would be to have the government pay people to dig a hole and pay another group of people to fill that back up and do that repeatedly. Now those people have jobs. If they have jobs, they can buy stuff. So that's his idea. These kick in and they influence the New Deal of Franklin D. Roosevelt. So he's our longest lasting president. He's going to be elected 4 times. Yes, it's 4. And he's the one that starts to change the face of government. At this time in 1932, or prior to 1932, the government was there to protect us in case America got attacked from outside or something like that. But as far as getting involved in business and stuff like that, very, very limited. Now it's going to change. Why? Well, because the Depression is so radical. It's so devastating. The U.S. has many places on the verge of rebellion. That's the whole point of that quote. Is like these people are eating the crud. They're not eating. They're watching the food be burnt up, the food being destroyed. It's just a matter of time before they go really crazy and say, forget it. So with that, he starts to initiate quite a few changes. So he starts to go towards, no offense, socialism to save capitalism. And he changes the purpose of government in this case. So more government involvements, checks on banks, increase work, add Social Security. All these are things that are going to be used to try to generate some sort of change. And ultimately, they're going to have limited success, but what's really going to have a big success is the spending that's going to happen in World War II, because Europe gets into a conflict and the U.S. is going to sell weapons. Hey, that's it. We finished another one on time. That rocks.